Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Kayla and I release new videos every Monday about all things BPD. So if that sounds good to you, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below as well as the bell notification up top. Today we're talking about relationships once again because as human beings, relationships are an integral part of our overall well-being. And so today I wanted to talk about the topic specifically of the push-pull relationship, which is something that we often see with folks who have BPD. Before diving into what the push-pull relationship is, I want to firstly mention that this is not specific to romantic relationships. We see this in friendships and relationships that we have with coworkers, with colleagues, with acquaintances. It just depends on the individual, because I know for myself, this specifically is not something that I deal with when in terms of my friendships or work relationships. It's really only with romantic relationships. However, I'm also mindful that this looks different for everyone else. And so when talking about the push-pull relationship, as the name says it, it's this pushing away and then pulling the other person closer, pushing ourselves, removing ourselves, avoidance, and then anxiously gripping onto the person. In relationships, often what happens with those who do have BPD, and just relationships as a whole, right? In general, we can think about this. When you first start dating someone, you go through this whole honeymoon phase where you idealize them. You think that they're the most interesting thing ever, that they're the best person for you, that they are amazing. You want to be with them all the time. What happens though is that slowly and surely, as the honeymoon phase starts to phase out, as it does with everyone, and usually that's within 12 to 18 months, I would say that couples are generally moved on to the next phase if they're still together at that point. But what happens, especially for those who have BPD, is that because we have more rigid models of the world, there's this black and white thinking pattern. When we idealize this person and we really picture them as perfect, the perfect partner, it's very extreme. And over time, as we start to exit the honeymoon phase, problems might start to rise. We might start to notice flaws in the other person that we don't really like, things that doesn't fit our model of perfection anymore. And so it's this problem with the normalcy of the other person emerging, because everyone has flaws and no one is perfect. When those things happen and then we have this rigid model of perfection and that doesn't fit in there, well then folks with BPD will start to devalue them. We'll start to essentially triggers this fear of abandonment, because you start thinking to yourself, well, this person that I thought was so perfect now is demonstrating flaws that don't fit into this model. Are those things meaning that they're going to hurt me, that they're going to abandon me, that they're going to reject me? And the next logical that happens is you start to pull away or push away the other person because you fear those things. And so this might look like self-sabotaging. It might look like putting yourself in scenarios that you know deep down at a core level will have negative consequences on your relationship, on the desire for your partner to remain with you. It's almost like you have the one foot out the door. And when thinking about attachment styles, we think of this anxious avoidant. This is the push-pull relationship. This is this anxious part playing out while also the avoidant part. Someone gets too close to you emotionally, it triggers this fear of abandonment, and because letting someone in is scary, because maybe in your childhood when you tried to be open and when you tried to be validated and heard, it was met with rejection, and so you kind of close yourself up from the world. And so when someone gets too close to you, you start to push them away. Obviously, the next thing that happens is that when you do push them away and they do start to move away, this again triggers this fear of abandonment. Well, now they are leaving me, they are moving away. I need to be extra anxious about the state of our relationship. I need to pull them in, I need to get them back. And so you might alternate between idealizing, devaluing them. They're not perfect, they're all these things, or they're getting too close to me, I need to push them away. They're leaving me, they're going to leave, I need to pull them in. I need to be extra nice. I need to make all these false promises of change and that I'm on this path to recovery and I'll do my best and I'm feeling better. And so we have this yo-yo pattern of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, which is exhausting for not only the person who is doing the pushing and the pulling, but for the partner as well. It can be extremely confusing because it's almost like you're met with these different versions of your partner and you don't really know who you're going to get at a certain moment. If what I have been talking about sounds familiar to you, if it sounds like something that you are currently struggling with, that you have in the past, then how can you help with this pattern? What can you do? The first thing I would recommend is to recognize that the pattern is inside of you and not in your partner. Now, by no means am I saying that in absolutely 100% of the time that it's always on you. No, I don't want us to think about this in black or white. Let's be in the gray. We have conscious that sometimes people we are with are actually toxic for us, right? They are actually bad and they have manipulative traits or whatever it may look like. Those are real case scenarios. And also, this can also exist in the same realm. We need to recognize that we do have this pattern inside of us. And then most oftentimes we may select partners who are unavailable based on our core content, right? This core belief of being inadequate, of not being good enough, that everything is our fault. So we may choose partners in relation to the way we feel about ourselves, and this then plays out in these toxic relationships where you're with people who are emotionally unavailable, who are abusive, who are manipulative, whatever that looks like. It can also lead to you're with partners who are genuinely good for you, and yet the same pattern still plays out with different people. And so at some point we need to take a look in the mirror and recognize that this is me, this is my pattern that's playing out in my own life, and I'm just recreating the same scenario over and over and over again. With this, while really difficult to have to admit that to yourself, it's also really liberating because that means that you have the responsibility and you have the power to change, that you're not dependent on other people to change the way that they are, because this pattern belongs to you. The second thing I would recommend is to write down your fears, write down your triggers, write down what your core beliefs are so that you can know yourself better. It's awesome if you recognize that this is a pattern and if you start taking responsibility. The next step is to get to know yourself better, know why this happens, where it comes from, what the protective mechanism is, because really I believe that these things that we're doing that are quote maladaptive were adaptive at some point in our lives. It's just that they're no longer serving us. They're no longer effective. And so how can we commune or speak with ourselves in a way that allows us to unload some of these burdens that we picked up as children, as adolescents, as adults, and to leave more space for compassion, for creativity, for kindness, for self-exploration. Thirdly, I want you to write out what you deserve from a relationship. And I know that this can be really difficult because if you think poorly about yourself, if you have low self-esteem, you might not think that you deserve anything wholesome. And I'm here to tell you today that you deserve stability, you deserve compassion, you deserve truth, respect, companionship. You deserve all of those things. And so taking some time to really reflect, and if it's easier to look at maybe people in your life that have relationships that you admire, looking at those things and trying to pick out what things that you admire from that can give you a good foundation to know what it is that you're really looking for in a partner. And I'm not talking about a list of physical attributes that you like the most. I'm talking about the core values, things that are important to you. Over time, by working on yourself, whether that's doing your own personal self-work, working with a therapist, with a coach, and also being in stable and healthy and secure relationships, you can start to unlock those patterns, you can start to untangle them, you can start to make sense out of them, to drop some of the burdens that you have picked up through your life. And it is possible to reparent ourselves. It is possible to change our attachment style, to become more secure, to become more trusting of others, to maintain healthy and stable relationships. It takes work, it takes time, it takes a lot of patience on both ends, so on both your end and your partner's end. And when you're with someone who really is with you and is willing to help you along this journey, you can change this pattern and you can learn to embrace companionship that is trusting and loving, secure and healthy. On that note, I'm curious to hear from you what things have helped you to switch or work on your attachment style. Just leave a comment down below. I always read and respond to all of them. So on that note, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I wish you all an amazing week, and I will see you next time for another episode of On the Line.